Beyond Reason Radio.
So here's the question I have for you today to start the show that I want you to think about for a moment before we get into the show. I keep hearing people say, we need to have the conversation. We need to have the dialogue. Here's the question I have. For the people that are saying that, people in Black Lives Matter and so forth, here's the question I have. Do they really want the conversation? Do they actually want to have a conversation? Do they actually want to have a dialogue? Think about that for a moment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. You might not want a voice of reason. You might not deserve a voice of reason, but you need a voice of reason, and I will be there tonight here on WFLA up until 8 p.m., and of course you can catch the podcast. For those listening to the podcast, please like the podcast, share with your friends. It's available on the iHeartRadio app and anywhere else podcasts are available. Another thing I'm going to discuss in just a moment, I believe we are in a cold civil war in this country. I've described it before as a social civil war. Some people have described it as a culture war. I think the best way to describe it today is a cold civil war. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. It's not a hot civil war. We have had violence, but I don't think we're at a hot civil war yet, at least. But we are in a cold civil war in this country. And I'll explain that as well in just a moment. We'll also talk about the whole Drew Brees, Colin Kaepernick controversy, and more. And, of course, Mr. Tom Benson is joining me on the show tonight as well. How are you, Tom?
Are we doing 2 hours tonight or something? You got a lot to talk about.
You know, I got to say, I will be on tomorrow morning filling in for Bud.
There you go.
So if I don't get it all in tonight, I will talk about some of it tomorrow morning. Bud's taking the day off tomorrow. So on Good Morning Orlando, I will be hosting 6 to 9 a.m. So there you go.
So
One more time.
Set your alarms on whatever device you use for 6 o'clock tomorrow and be there with Yaffee.
Yes, exactly. Get up and listen to me. Should do that anyway. Like I said, the voice of reason you need right now. So how are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Nice, cool day today with the rain.
Yeah.
Nice rain. Mm-hmm.
I think it's supposed to rain most of the weekend, right? Because we have that tropical system that's like pushing up all this.
That's right. It's going to get close to us. I don't think they know how close yet, but it's out there, yeah.
Cristobal.
Yeah.
Is what it's called. Now, I always get worried. The path they have this thing taking is just going straight up to the Gulf of Mexico and then going up to the Gulf states up there. And they say it's going to be a tropical storm when it hits.
Okay.
But I always worry when storms get in the Gulf of Mexico like that.
Sure, yeah.
That they can strengthen real quick, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a hurricane this early in hurricane season. So I'm a little worried about that. The reason why they don't think it's going to strengthen that much, I believe, is because it's moving pretty quickly. Okay. They expect it to speed up quite a bit once it gets in the Gulf, so it doesn't want to have time
to generate more energy.
To really strengthen.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
We
Just
shall
a little
see.
worried. So yesterday on the show, I was discussing the George Floyd situation, the riots, and the protests, and why I believe that a lot of the protests were happening. And some of the riots were happening. But I want to look at the bigger picture tonight, because that's what I try to do on this show, is look at the big picture. You know, they say people don't see the forest for the trees. I try to look at the forest. I try to take a step back and look at everything. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we are in a type of civil war right now. This is something that I've discussed on this show for years now. You know, I heard Glenn Beck talking about it this morning on this station. He thinks that a true civil war is coming in this country. You know, Michael Savage has a book about it, Stop the Coming Civil War. I mean, this is not a new concept, really. And over the weekend, when I was seeing the riots, when I was seeing the violence, when I was seeing stuff put on social media, I thought, man, this is scary. because people were being beaten in the streets for just wanting to protect their business. And protesters were out there. Those same protesters who yelled at protesters just a couple of months ago because of the coronavirus, they were going to kill grandma. All of a sudden, they don't care about that, and they're protesting. And I'm thinking, what is really going on here? What is really happening here? Is it Trump? Is it all Trump's fault? I mean, General Mattis thinks it's all Trump's fault, and I'll talk about that a little later in the show.
And a lot of people think that everything that's going on is an endeavor to get rid of Trump.
Yeah. So is it? Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that is part of it. But is this all Trump's fault, the division is? Is it just Trump fueling division? Do we just need a president that will unite us? Well, the question is, unite us under what? People keep saying we need to unite, but unite under what? We can't even unite under the national anthem.
Or the flag.
We can't even unite under the flag. We can't even unite under the fact that violence is wrong. The definition of violence, we can't even unite. And yet I'm told we need a uniter. I'm told this is Trump's fault for being divisive. Trump said 3 words, law and order. Seems pretty easy that we should unite under that, right? Law and order. We can't even unite under that. So I think this country right now is what I'm calling a cold civil war. Now, for those who are students of history, actually for those who were just alive during it, it wasn't that long ago, we were in a so-called Cold War with Russia in the 20th century up until 1991, I believe, is when the Soviet Union actually fell. And the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. But we were in a Cold War. And the reason why it was called a Cold War is we were basically in direct conflict with the Soviet Union, but we're not in direct war with the Soviet Union. That means it wasn't an open war between our military and their military where we attacked each other's countries. It was a Cold War. We had ideological struggles for influence across the world, military buildups on both sides to protect each other, but it was not a straight-out hot war. Now, and it was mostly an ideological one, but there were flare-ups. Vietnam was a hot war, obviously. We went and sent soldiers, and our soldiers died fighting in that country. But that was really just an extension of the Cold War. We were trying to stop communism from spreading and stop communist influence from spreading in that part of the world. Another example is the Korean War. Another example is the Bay of Pigs. Another example is what was going on in South America. Another example is Afghanistan, things that went on in the Middle East. There were flare-ups that turned into actual war and actual violence between us and, communists supported by the Soviet Union. Now, a lot of people on the left will tell you that, that's just because America was imperialist and trying to spread its empire. Actually, no, it was the Soviet Union that was imperialist. We were trying to stop the imperialism of the Soviet Union. That's where a lot of the conflict came from in the 20th century. So there was violence, but it was flare-ups. It wasn't a direct war with the Soviet Union. Now, why was there no direct war with the Soviet Union? Because a direct war with them would have resulted in mutually assured destruction. The reason why we didn't want to go to direct war, and they didn't want to go to direct war with us, is it probably would have ended in nuclear war that would have destroyed both of us. This is where we are in the United States of America today, in my opinion. We are in a cold civil war where you have two sides that have fundamentally different views of what the culture should be, what our government should look like, what our economics should look like. Fundamentally different views on those things. And right now we are seeing flare-ups of violence in this cold civil war. So you have one side that believes that despite some of our racist past, that this country is mostly good, and that this country is a land of opportunity, that this country does give opportunities to people of all races, and that because of that, we live in the freest, most prosperous country in the history of mankind, and that we have made immeasurable progress. And all races have made immeasurable progress just in the last 50 years. The other side believes this country was founded on racism, that racism is still systemic, that racism is institutionalized, and that blacks are really victims of that systemic racism, and they will not succeed until the system is completely changed. You can say the same thing about economics. We have one side that really believes in free market capitalism, in limited government and private property rights. You have another side that doesn't believe in that. Another side believes in shared prosperity, in redistribution of wealth, in equity, and equal distribution of wealth, and that basically capitalism has been bad for too many people in this country, including minorities. These are just a couple of examples. When you have such ideological differences between two mass groups in this country, what else do you call it other than some kind of civil war? Why is it a cold civil war, though? Why is it not turned into a hot civil war other than some flare-ups like the riots we have seen recently? Well, I'll tell you. Because a total civil war means mutually assured destruction. You know, we had a civil war in this country before under Lincoln, but that was more of a geographical civil war. So it was one part of the country fighting against another part of the country, and it did not mean mutually assured destruction. The North could eventually and would eventually defeat the South, occupy the South, and you had Reconstruction, which of course was a failure in a lot of ways, but it did not mean mutually assured destruction. That would not work in today's world. If we had an all-out civil war in this country, you would not be fighting people in another state. You would be fighting people down the road from you. Our ideological differences are spread throughout the country, in every state, in every city, in every county. So a hot civil war, if that ever blew up, would mean mutually assured destruction. And that's why I think we haven't gone that far yet. So the question is, where do we go from here? We have to keep fighting the ideological battle. Eventually, I believe, hopefully, maybe I'm too optimistic, but one of the main reasons we won the Cold War against the Soviet Union is the Soviet system was fundamentally flawed. And eventually it collapsed within itself. And we were able to promote a system that was fundamentally good and help speed up that collapse while being a light to the rest of the world. Can we do that now in this cold civil war in this country where the other side, which I believe is fundamentally flawed, ends up destroying itself and we can win the ideological cultural battle? Is that something we can do? I'm not 100% sure. I hope so. I want to fight for the truth. But I believe that's one of the biggest reasons why we see what we see in the country right now. A cold civil war. That is what we're in. And this will continue. And you will see flare-ups of violence. Will it go to a full civil war? I certainly hope not, because that will mean mutually assured destruction. That will mean not just the end of my side, but the end of the country. And I don't even want to think about the end of the country, because a lot of the people that want the end of the country, that want the end of the American system, that want the end of American government, they have no idea what that actually means. They have no idea what they would really replace it with, and they would regret it in the long run. I'll tell you why they'll regret it in just a moment. We have a lot more to get to as well, as I try to be your voice of reason. The voice of reason you need. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. In the last segment, I was discussing the fact that I believe we are in a cold civil war in this country. The reason why I bring that up is to give you more context of the George Floyd protest and the riots in the streets we've seen and the reaction we've seen elsewhere in the country. And this is just the latest thing. I mean, the division over the coronavirus was very, very stark in this country. You had protesters protesting the lockdowns, and there was massive division over that. I'm just pointing this out because what's going on with the protests right now is much bigger than just police brutality or anything like that. It's much bigger. It's being fueled by something bigger. Now, as I said before, a lot of the people out there are just trying to virtue signal and show how good of a person they are. But the ideological leaders behind this stuff are a part of a cold civil war. Completely different views of what our culture is, of what our country is, of what our uniting institution should be, and so forth. An example of this would be Professor Cornel West. He was on CNN recently. He was asked about the riots and the protest. He's a black leftist professor with Anderson Cooper. Listen to what he says here. This is much more than just protesting police brutality. He's calling for something much different than that. Here's what he said.
But I think we are witnessing America as a failed social experiment. And what I mean by that is that the history of black people for over 200 and some years in America has been looking at America's failure. Its capitalist economy could not generate and deliver in such a way that people could live lives of decency. The nation state, its criminal justice system, its legal system could not generate protection of rights and liberties. And now our culture, of course, is so market-driven, everybody for sale, everything for sale. It can't deliver the kind of really real nourishment for soul, for meaning, for purpose.
So that's what he views America as. Now, I would tell him to go to Hong Kong today, when the protesters out there who are really fighting for rights put up the American flag. Why do you think they do that? Because they actually understand that for the most part, the United States does deliver justice, does deliver prosperity, does deliver freedom for the most part. We're not perfect. If you want perfection, forget it. You'll never get it. Utopia is impossible until Jesus comes back, basically. But there's a reason why the Hong Kong protesters were holding American flags. Because you want to talk about real oppression where they can't live lives of decency, where they can't get real nourishment of the soul. Look at China and communist China. So he's wrong about that, but that's how they view the country. He's also wrong about the fact when he talks about capitalism can't, everything for sale doesn't find nourishment for the soul. It was never meant to. It was never meant to. The culture, capitalism was about your private property rights and enjoying the fruits of your labor. It wasn't about finding full fulfillment. That has to be done through cultural institutions. But a lot of those cultural institutions have been taken away or infringed on by the growth of government. So he's blaming capitalism for that. Why not blame the growth of government for that, which is infringed on these cultural institutions? That does give us meaning. That does give us purpose. Because what he wants, when he says that, what do you think he believes gives people purpose? I guarantee you it's the state. I guarantee you what he wants to help force people to have purpose is the state. He's wrong about that. What else did he say?
He wants the government to provide everything. And the fact that the capitalism doesn't deliver is a wrong concept, because capitalism is there in order to provide a mechanism for people to take advantage of the opportunities.
Exactly.
You just don't deliver it for the sake of, I'm here, give it to me, you know?
Yeah, and you said deliver lives of decency.
Well,
more people have been released from dire poverty in the world in the last 50 years than in the history of mankind because capitalism has been expanding across the globe. Mm-hmm. Those are just facts. So what is he talking about? As I'm sure he doesn't seem to ever be starving. He seems to live a life of decency himself. He seems to have not only physical nourishment, but mental nourishment.
I wonder what kind of cell phone he has.
Exactly. It's so dumb for me to hear when they complain about this stuff when most people in this country live better than most people in the history of the world.
Amen.
And then he also, I just lost my train of thought. There was just so many things. There was one other point that he made that I was thinking about, and
we can hear the cut again.
Yeah, go on and play it one more time.
But I think we are witnessing America as a failed social experiment. And what I mean by that is that the history of black people for over 200 and some years in America has been looking at America's failure. Its capitalist economy could not generate and deliver in such a way that people could live lives of decency. The nation state, its criminal justice system, its legal system could not generate protection of rights and liberties. And now our culture, of course, is so market-driven, everybody for sale, everything for sale. It can't deliver the kind of really real nourishment for soul, for meaning, for purpose.
One reason why what he's saying is wrong, I found this out when I got a haircut. We were talking about that in the last show. I got a haircut.
Uh-huh.
My hairstylist, who was a minority, she was so glad to be there to cut my hair. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just about the money.
Or you. It was everybody.
Or me. Yeah. But it wasn't about, oh, I really needed the money. That wasn't what she was saying. She just was fulfilling a purpose in her life.
She wanted the opportunity to do what she does.
Yeah, she finds meaning and purpose and fulfillment on using her skills to not only make a living, but to help other and have a reason to get up in the morning. And yet, we found out with the lockdowns how many people lost meaning in their lives by taking away the capitalist system. What he's saying is nonsense. So the question I have for the next segment, they say it's time to have the conversation. Is that really what they want? This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
For those on the left who are protesting, those in Black Lives Matter, which of course Black Lives Matter. I don't know anyone who thinks Black lives don't matter. Everyone believes that Black lives matter. But I keep hearing this, we need to have the dialogue. We need to have the conversation. Okay, great. Conversation's fine, but I just wonder if that's really what they want. The reason why I'm bringing this up is there was a recent conversation between Charlemagne the God, a radio host, and Rush Limbaugh. So Charlemagne the God, a black radio host, supports the Black Lives Matter movement, and of course Rush Limbaugh. I'm reading from the Daily Wire here. In a gesture of dialogue, there's that word again, radio personality Charlemagne the God recently held a discussion with conservative titan Rush Limbaugh in which they discussed a range of topics from systemic racism to white privilege. The two seem to agree on little beyond the fact that George Floyd, an unarmed black man, was murdered by a police officer. And everyone agrees on that, for the most part. As I said in the beginning, one of the silver linings is that's something we could all agree on. That wasn't enough, of course. Speaking with late-night host Stephen Colbert on Wednesday night, Charlemagne felt the interview with Rush Limbaugh was a waste of time. What do you mean? I thought we needed to have the conversation. I thought we needed to have a dialogue.
You have to start. You have to start somewhere, huh?
That's what I heard they wanted. Is that really what they want? It says, what bothered me about the conversation was after I left that conversation, I felt it wasn't productive, Charlemagne said. I have no problem talking to people from the other side, but I have to feel like it's really your truth. I don't know if I got that from Rush. It felt like more of a performance. I don't think so. I think Rush is being honest. But this is what he said. He said, it didn't feel productive. It felt like a waste of my time. Charlemagne told Colbert earlier in the interview that America is a private club founded by old rich white men for rich white men that traps people in a web of white supremacy. During the interview with Rush Limbaugh, the discussion got heated when the two sparred over the concept of white privilege. When Limbaugh cited Charlemagne's success as a black man, the radio personality asserted that America denies black people justice and just plain decency, while telling them they should be happy to be here in the chance that they could be rich one day. Limbaugh said, when did I say that? Charlemagne, you're adding things to my mouth that I did not say. I was trying to be complimentary of you, and I'm trying to illustrate that you are an example to others, which Rush is, of course, exactly right. Charlemagne said, how are you going to use your privilege as a white male to combat this prejudice? Is this really a dialogue when he says something like that? How are you going to use your privilege?
He's making talking points, and he doesn't want to really hear what Rush's answer is. He wants Rush to capitulate and agree with him.
Exactly. When you ask a question like that, you are setting up a premise. And if we don't buy into your premise, then we're the ones, of course, that are not having the dialogue, right? You're right. He doesn't want a conversation. He doesn't want a dialogue. He wants us to agree with him.
It's like the left is said to be inclusive as long as you agree with what they have to say. And, you know, for Mr. Charlemagne, I think he should look to one person who has taken advantage of opportunity, Byron Allen, the comedian. He has parlayed his talents and skills into creating a empire, a media empire. He owns the Weather Channel. He owns TV stations. He owns networks. If he can do it, anybody can do it. You just have to have the know-how to get it done, have connections, have an education.
Right. We can all agree that equal opportunity is a good thing. That was the dream, right? But we're told that, there is no equal opportunity. Which Rush was trying to make the point that, yes, there are examples of black men succeeding in this country. And the best way to get more black men to succeed is to inspire them to work towards that success and to stop the breakup of the family. That's the best way to do it. But Charlemagne doesn't want to listen to what Rush has to say there. He wants Rush to give into his premise. And that's why I asked the question, do they really want a dialogue? Do they want a dialogue when they tell you to kneel and admit your white privilege? Is that a dialogue? I'm just not convinced that that's what they want. So another point, another reason why I bring this up is James Mattis, who I like, Mad Dog Mattis. I listened to his audiobook. It was pretty good. But he came out and denounced Trump yesterday in a written statement. Now, this goes against what Mattis has said he believes in. Even in his book, he says he does not comment on current sitting presidents because he doesn't believe it's his position as a military leader. He should do that. It undermines that president. Well, he went against his own beliefs there. But he said... well,
he's got that book out there.
Yeah, that's true. He said, I have watched this week's unfolding events angry and appalled. The words equal justice under law are carved in the pediment of the United States Supreme Court. This is precisely what protesters are rightly demanding. It is a wholesome and unifying demand, one that all of us should be able to get behind. We must not be distracted by a small number of lawbreakers. Our cities were on fire across the country. Oh, small number of lawbreakers. 4 black men, 3 black men have been killed in recent days because of these small number of rioters. 1 is in critical condition, I believe. Says the protests are defined by tens of thousands of people of conscience who are insisting that we live up to our values, our value as people, and our values as a nation. You know who else agrees with equal justice under the law? President Trump. You know how I know he agrees with that? Because he called for an investigation by the FBI into the killing of George Floyd early on.
Within 24 hours.
Within 24 hours. So what are you talking about? Then he complains about the fact that, he said, we must reject any thinking of our cities as a battle space that our uniformed military is called upon to dominate. At home, we should use our military only when requested to do so on very rare occasions by state governors. Militarizing our response as we witness in D.C. sets up a false conflict between the military and civilian society. It erodes the moral ground, yada, yada, yada. The point I wanted to make there when he says to dominate, he wasn't saying to dominate peaceful protesters. I keep hearing people point that out. Oh, he just wanted to dominate peaceful protest. He didn't want to dominate peaceful protesters. He wanted to dominate the rioters. And he called upon the military as a last resort if the governors don't get it under control. That's what he said. Let's see here. He said, Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort. My question is, unite us under what? Trump goes out there and says law and order. I think we should be united under law and order. Is your complaint that he doesn't try to unite us, or is your complaint that he doesn't try to unite us under your preconceived beliefs? The reason why Trump was in there is half the country got sick of the politicians not listening to them, believing the premise of the left. The problem is, a lot of times when they talk about uniting, they're not talking about uniting under truth. They're talking about uniting under leftist principles. And then they blame Trump for the division because he stands up for those who are sick of kowtowing to leftist principles. And I'm not saying there are some things that Trump does, especially on Twitter, and some things he says that I wish he wouldn't say because they are not united. I completely agree with that. I wish Trump had more vision. But to act like Trump is the reason why there's so much division in this country is absurd. The Tea Party movement and the Occupy Wall Street movement happened under Obama. Riots in Baltimore and Ferguson happened under Obama. Says we can come through this trying time stronger and with a renewed sense of purpose and respect for one another. But who's the ones not showing respect? The rioters. Trump comes out against the rioters, and it's Trump's fault that we don't respect one another. Okay. The pandemic has shown us that it's not our troops who are willing to offer the ultimate sacrifice for the safe. It's not only our troops that are willing to offer the ultimate sacrifice for our safety of the community. Americans in hospitals, grocery stores, post offices, and elsewhere have put their lives on the line in order to serve their fellow citizens and their country. I can't agree with that. I totally agree with that. So there you go. I get a cringe when they just say these buzzwords like unite. I'm all for unification, but we can't even unite under the national anthem. and we blame Trump. When all these divisions happened way before Trump came into office. We're in a cold civil war. We are in a cold civil war. And the other side wants us to unite, but wants us to unite under their principles. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, Well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. Don't forget, you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. We're on Facebook Live right now. A lot of people do like to watch on Facebook Live, but one of the best ways to catch the show, if you can't catch it live on the radio, catch the podcast. Podcast available on the iHeartRadio app and anywhere podcasts are available, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, all of those places. So the latest controversy is an NFL quarterback, something he said defending the American flag. Drew Brees got a lot of criticism the past couple of days because he said this about standing for the national anthem in a recent interview.
Well, I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II, one in the Army and one in the Marine Corps, both risking their lives to protect our country and to try to make our country and this world a better place. So every time I stand with my hand over my heart, looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears, thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military, but for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movements of the 60s, and everyone and all that has been endured by so many people up until this point. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Oh, see, he talked about unity there, but it wasn't uniting under the right premise. Oh, don't you just love that? Well, I mean, what he said there is exactly right.
I got no problems with it. Sounds good to me.
But he got blasted for it. Why? Because they say, well, it's not about disrespecting the flag or disrespecting the military. It's about police brutality, right? You know, part of me wants to believe that, and for some people, maybe it is just about police brutality. But remember, this was started by Colin Kaepernick. I don't believe Colin Kaepernick is just upset about police brutality. If you see some of his other comments and some of the other things he has done in his life, it is much more than police brutality. He hates this country. He believes this country is a bad place for blacks. He believes it's fundamentally racist. And he wants it to change. It is much more than just police brutality. In fact, here's the original interview right after he started kneeling for the flag. Notice something he says here. This is years ago when all this started. This was Kaepernick talking about why he was kneeling.
Yes, I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed. To me, this is something that has to change. And when there's significant change, and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent, and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, I'll stand. There's a lot of things that need to change. One specifically is police brutality. There's people being murdered unjustly and not being held accountable. Cops are getting paid leave for killing people. That's not right.
Notice what he said there. Couple of things. He said people are being oppressed. Are people really being oppressed in the United States of America? Really oppressed? Not only that, but he said there's a lot of things that need to change. One of them was police brutality, but he said a lot of things. I guarantee you, if we solve the problem of police brutality, which if you look at the statistics, we already have.
Well, he's in football. Let's move the goalposts.
Exactly. He would still kneel because it is much more than police brutality. Trust me. A guy doesn't leave the United States on the 4th of July and say, it's not independence for my country. I'm going to go to Africa because he loves America and just wants it to live up to its ideals.
And if people are oppressed and there are a lot of things wrong with America, why do so many people try to come here?
Yeah, exactly. Why do the Hong Kong protesters put up American flags?
Amen.
I want you to listen to a cut here. Voice of Reason of the day. Burgess Owens, former NFL player. He's actually running for Congress now. Black NFL player, former NFL player. This is a few years ago in 2017, but he talks about why he stands for the national anthem.
I tell you, we have to understand really what our country's always been about, and that is every generation, their job and our job is make sure the next generation has hope. They feel great about our country, great about their opportunities to move forward. These young men who are now millionaires because of the country, because of the price paid, are not only failing our kids, but they're betraying our past. These kids are looking for examples of what it takes to succeed. And these guys are making millions of dollars, collectively billions of dollars. And instead of standing and being proud of who they are and proud of this country gave them an opportunity, right, and taking the opportunities to actually do some business in their off season, they sit down and they put our flag down.
Amen. Instead of being thankful to the country that gave you the opportunity to make millions of dollars, you put the flag down. Here's the next cut. He continues on.
I would say this. I think black and white Americans need to learn our history. First of all, white Americans, stop apologizing. This country is the greatest in the history of mankind because of what we've done together and what white Americans have done to help the black Americans to experience what we're experiencing today. 8 years of a black president, millionaires sitting on the sideline and all complaining, and that's why that book is labeled Whiners and Weenies and Wimps. We need to stand up, be proud of who we are, and thank goodness for people like Jim Brown. I respect him. I wish I could respect the leadership in the NFL because those guys are really taking a knee on our entire country by letting these guys run rampant the way they are with the anti-American sentiment.
I don't believe that this is really just about police brutality. We can all unite and be against police brutality. The whole country did unite against the brutality against George Floyd. But this is about much more to a lot of these people. They believe that the system is fundamentally racist and fundamentally unjust, and that its history is fundamentally racist and unjust. Unbelievable. And there is a black man right there saying, look, this country's giving me amazing opportunities. White people, stop apologizing. Instead, be thankful for this country. Doesn't mean we haven't made mistakes. Doesn't mean we don't still make mistakes. But in perspective of the history of the world, in perspective of the rest of the world right now, this is a fundamentally good country based on fundamentally good principles. And that's why he stands, and that's why I stand. Appreciate you listening to the show. I'm hosting Good Morning Orlando tomorrow, 6 to 9 a.m. Hope you'll join me then. Make sure to listen to the podcast if you missed any of the shows. And, like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter, and I will catch you guys next time.